Good afternoon, everyone. I've got a little bit of housekeeping to do before we start our program today. Please turn your cell phones off. We record these programs and they will be featured at a later time on YouTube. And also remember, if you go to whisper to your friend, that it picks up on our YouTubes. So I'm just letting you know ahead of time. We always want to acknowledge Mickey Hummel. Mickey is right up here up front. He's our town council member. And we honestly couldn't have these lectures and presentations if it weren't for his availability and ability to run everything in the closet and up here. And he also does all the YouTubing for us, so it's really wonderful to have him. Today it's a real honor and privilege to introduce, I'm going to give his title first, and then I've been asked to refer to him as Fred. But it is a real honor to introduce Colonel Fred Gregory, who is a graduate of the Air Force Academy. He was NASA's astronaut class and flew 3 shuttle missions. He piloted a 7-day space shuttle mission on the Challenger in 1985. Fred kept on making history when he commanded the Discovery crew orbiting Earth 79 times during their 120-hour flight. Fred has held a variety of posts during his time at NASA, including launch support for 2 of the first space shuttle missions. He's been Chief of Operational Safety, Chief Astronaut for Training. He served as a member of the boards for Orbiter Configuration Control, Space Shuttle Program Control, and more recently he had been promoted from Associate Administrator to Deputy Administrator in 2002 and in 2005, and was briefly NASA's acting head administrator before he retired. By the end of his career, Fred Gregory reached the rank of Colonel in the United States Air Force, with over 400 hours logged in space and extensive experience supporting launches. After he was finished flying missions himself, he certainly left his mark on the United States space programs. He's been awarded a variety of honors, including 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 16 Air Medals, the Air Force Commendation Medal, 2 NASA Distinguished Service Medals, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, and also NASA's Outstanding Leadership Award. So how did the little Bayside History Museum in North Beach come to meet someone of such a caliber? Thanks to one of our earlier talks several years ago, I had given a talk about Camp Roosevelt, which is your oldest Boy Scout camp still existing in Chesapeake Beach. Part of that talk was 5 slides begging anyone who had ever heard of Camp Chesapeake in Lusby. It was a Boy Scout camp for African American kids during segregation from 1951 to 1955. I spent 3 years trying to find anybody who had ever gone there, who had ever heard of it, who had a picture of it, all to no avail. Ding, ding, ding goes my phone, February of 2004, and Mr. Gregory just says, "Hello, my name is," and I went to Camp Chesapeake. And I'm like, wow, okay. He said, "I have some pictures you might like." So I made an appointment with him for a Saturday last March in 2024, and in comes just this nicest man who's sitting at the table talking to us for more than an hour and a half. And every single picture in this book that we did later was based on, not only did he have the pictures, his father started this Camp Chesapeake in Lusby. And if you think about it, they drove from Washington, D.C. back in the day when the roads were not so great, all the way down to Lusby. Camp Chesapeake would later become Camp Bay Breeze and part of the Calvert State Park. So a friendship formed between the Bayside History Museum and between Colonel Gregory, who really likes to be called Fred, And he sat down with us, and how amazing was it that he could identify the name of all of his friends he went to camp with in 1953. So that's how we formed this relationship. We actually put a book quickly together with Vincent Turner in the back and myself. And with Fred's blessing, he just loved this book. He looked at it, added things to it, added more, and the rest is history. So that's why today we really have this privilege. We didn't know anything about him until at the end of doing an accession form. I said, well, you know, we'd like to know a little bit about you so that I can put it on this form. And I'm sitting there and I about fell out of my chair because I didn't know if I was more excited about getting pictures of Camp Chesapeake or the fact that I was sitting beside an astronaut. So without further ado, it is a real honor and a privilege for the Bayside History Museum to offer Colonel Fred Gregory as our speaker today.
One introduction. My wife just walked in. And next door neighbor, Sharon, is back there too. I didn't know I was doing this until she told me. I'm going to start, and you know, you all know this guy right here. Mark was a, well, let me show you this. Okay, junior high school. Here's Mark, right here. Here's me. So we're homeboys from Southeast DC. That picture, by the way, was taken in March 1955. Do the math. That was 70 years ago. That's when I met him. Maybe there was someone who knew him earlier than that, but I'm not thinking so. And so Mark and I went to junior high school together at Sousa Junior High in DC for DC folks. And then we went to Anacostia High School. And he was the president of our class there at Sousa, and he was also the president of our class at Anacostia. I've got a confession. You all call her Grace. I call her Braiding Mary Grace. Because I can't go with the Grace Mary. Mary Grace sounds better to me, so I just make it everything. But Grace has a picture of that junior high school graduation class over there that shows that there were more than this in that particular. It was a brand new school at the time. Sousa, our principal, was a Miss McAuliffe. And for any historians here, military historians, her brother was Tony McAuliffe. And Tony, General McAuliffe, was responded to the Germans at the Battle of the Bulge when he was asked, do you quit? And he responded with nuts. And so that's the way he is known. But I didn't know that Miss McAuliffe was that family. Family's a long DC family, by the way. So that was 70 years ago, and this is just last fall. We have been friends for a very, very long time, and obviously devastated, as all of you were, when hearing about his passing a couple of days ago. He was a great guy. We were good friends for a very long time. We lived on either side of Fort DuPont Park, for those who know anything about Southeast DC. And the cool thing about DuPont Park, it was a park that you felt safe in all the time. And we would ride our bikes in there and run and build forts, and there were big open fields, and you could play football and baseball there. And so we had kind of everything all in the neighborhood. One of the things I enjoyed doing was at night, going out and lying in a field and you knew Southeast in those days, there weren't that many lights, street lights or anything around. And so when you lay down and look up, you had nothing that interfered with what you were looking at. And I was fascinated by the sky, just fascinated by the sky. And, at that time, when I was probably 5 or 6 years old, I thought, wow, that's amazing. It's all out there for me. And I'm the center of it all. And, that's kind of the way it feels when you're out there. And so that was 5. And somebody told me that it was the Milky Way galaxy. And at 5 or 6, I'm thinking, this does not look like a Milky Way candy bar to me. So there was a disassociation between the name and actually what the thing was. Well, many, many, many years later, when I went to the Air Force Academy and took some astronomy classes, that I learned first what a constellation was, and that the Milky Way was a constellation. And that we Earth, was in that constellation, and that we were here on an insignificant spiral arm. See how those things look? It looks like it's rotating, and the arms are kind of in a spiral formation out there. We were on the Orion arm, which is a minor arm, by the way. And so we're actually a minor solar system on a minor arm on the Orion constellation, the Milky Way constellation. And if you could fly at the speed of light, if you could, we're in a vehicle and you were on one edge of this thing, it would take you 100,000 years, the speed of light, to go from one side of this constellation to the other side. So it's huge, it's absolutely huge. During those times, also, we learned about our solar system. And I can tell your age immediately. There are 8 planets up here. I can tell your age immediately, because we all know that there are 9 planets, and one day we're going to get Pluto back there, where it rightfully belongs. Maybe we can get that done soon. But we're part of the first 4 planets. They call the rocky planets for obvious reasons, that we're kind of rocky. And we're the 3rd planet, or the 3rd rock from the sun. It's been a pretty ideal location, at least for us humans, because we can live here in great comfort. There's an asteroid belt, then we've got the gaseous planets out there, because it's kind of the way they are. They're kind of gaseous out there. There's probably something solid in there, but it's not as obvious as it is with us. And I had the opportunity to fly in space, as you've heard, and when you get there, people ask me, well, what's it like to go in space? And all I can tell you is that maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes after you've been there, you will have forgotten that you're in space. So the transition is so easy that soon you forget about being in space and weightless, and then you just start doing your daily things. And so once you have, gone through that 10 or 15 minutes, then you begin doing things of interest. And the orbiter had many, many beautiful windows that you could look out of. And most of them were optically pure, the overhead windows, not the front ones. And we would take pictures, go to those windows and take pictures looking out. Now, again, I can tell your age I can tell you I am using a camera. I spell that word for you. And not only am I using a camera, but we have film in it. So for those who remember that, that's what this is. And I'm looking through, oh, by the way, the shirt, same shirt. 1989, Land's End. So, taking a picture, obviously the first thing I wanted to see was my home. And that was my home. And that's Earth. beneath you. And some of the earlier astronauts had said, well, it looks like a blue marble. It looks like a blue marble. The other thing I can confirm is that the Earth is round. So any of you flat Earth people, forget it. It's a fascinating Earth. And when you look down at it, like this, I mean, we're only about 200, 250 miles above the surface of the Earth, outside the atmosphere, but looking down, you're seeing things that are occurring right now, this moment. And so I can tell you by looking down at this, and for those who don't recognize it, this is the southern end of India. I can tell you by looking at this, and you will be able to agree with me, I can tell you exactly where the predominant wind comes from. I can tell you where the mountains are. I can tell you where the best place to go fishing is, just by looking down. The winds come from this way. This is the Indian Ocean out here. And when the winds move, picks moisture up, and when it rises over the dirt, it rains. And it's green and lush until it gets to the mountains. And on the windward side, it's green and lush. On the leeward side, it's dry and arid. And it's so obvious when you see it like that. Now, you see this lighter water in here. Generally, when you look down at the oceans and you see lighter water, it indicates that it's colder water. And that's water that has begun at the bottom and has risen. And when it rises, it brings nutrients with it. Well, fish love nutrients. And so if you're going to go fishing, that's the place to go, right here. Now, being about 250 above, if there were a storm of some sort moving across that dirt, you'd actually see that storm moving. And when we on Earth, when we're in a thunderstorm, a lightning storm, it appears very chaotic to you. You don't know where it's going to happen next, or whether it's going to be near or far. When in space you look down at a massive storm, there's no chaos at all. And so if you have a lightning here, it'll go whoosh, right up the storm. And it looks coordinated and ordinary. And I always thought that, we take a fourth grader or a third grader and send them to space. In one day, they will probably learn more than they do in years in school. Because it so makes sense when you see it like this instead of reading about it in books. Well, where have we been? Well, we have, as soon as I learned this thing, we've been to the moon. Heck, believe it or not, the last time we were on the moon was 1972. And that's a long damn time ago to be on the moon. So I didn't show you a picture of an actual image taken. What I wanted to kind of summarize is just what's in this picture, this artist depiction of it. Bob McCall, a great artist and good friend of mine, painted this. And it shows everything I want to tell you about the moon. There's a lunar lander. There are astronauts there. That's the Earth right there. And that's what the heavens look like out there. You see what it looks like on the surface. That's accurate. But the important thing to me is that flag right there. And I know a lot of people thought, well, we planted the flag, we own it. No. What that means is that we've been there. We've visited there. And I would hope very soon many other countries go to the moon and take their flags. Because it's just the kind of a thing you do. And if you feel comfortable just sitting at home every day, then you will never do anything like this. It's scary, it's risky, you lose lives. But oh my God, this is an adventure on a journey that you're taking. And this is one of the journeys that we're on, one of the adventures we're on. We've been to Mars. I'm never a human, and I hope soon that we will go to Mars. But this is interesting. We have a rover there, then we got a little helicopter. You know, and you would think, hey, we see helicopters all the time. They fly to Pax River and they fly over you, and you read about them, unfortunately, last week up near National Airport. But the atmosphere is so totally different on Mars that you really have to be a creative group of people to think, how can I make a helicopter fly in that atmosphere? Well, that little team got together. The oldest one was about 28. And they said, you know, some old guy probably said, you can't do that. And they said, sure. And so there they are. So this is a little helicopter. It's got some, I mean, it's like one of these drones or something like that. It just drives around. Because why are we at Mars, for Pete's sake? What's the interest? You know, I've always wondered, are we alone? I mean, that's like in our solar system, you know? I mean, in this Milky Way, are we the only things that are living? You know, I don't think so. And I think that we've seen things when we look at Mars that give you a sense that maybe there was water there at one time. We're seeing these water channels up there that look similar to what's on Earth. And if there's water, obviously we depend on water and the elements. We're interested in, one, discovering whether there's water there. And so if there's water, there's a possibility that there either was, are, or could be some kind of life similar to us there. And so we're not only interested in discovering and exploring those areas, but to actually bring home samples from there to see perhaps something that indicates water, or maybe some life form. You know, we consider life form, it looks like us, right? But maybe there's something sitting next to you that you don't know because you don't recognize it. And so that's what we would want to do, is bring something back. And so that little reconnaissance airplane is searching for areas of possibility, and then the rover goes and collects her samples. But we also have doing some excavation up there too, and creating some piles of dirt, rocks. And one day we'd like to bring some of that back and put them in our laboratories to discover and do a more thorough analysis of it. Well, here I am in one of my crews. This is actually my crew I flew with in 1989. And I want you to note that amazing orange suit. I think that orange goes with anything you could possibly wear. I mean, it is so universal. And when we put our helmets on, our gloves on, and it only weighs about 75 pounds. So not only is it good looking, but it's heavy. No, light. And we're getting ready to get on that pointy thing in the background there. That's the orbiter Discovery. This is the way it looks when we're inside. The front part of the orbiter was called the crew compartment. It was the only place where the crew hung out. And we had, it was pressurized, where we ate and went to the bathroom and slept and everything else like that. And this is the way, this is the configuration, kind of the configuration for liftoff and for reentry. You did go on the wrong one. Okay, got the right one. Okay, commander sits over here. Pilot sits here. Mission specialist or flight engineer sits here. Mission specialist number 1, me, and mission specialist number 2. There are only 4 seats up top, and so mission specialist number 2 sat in a seat that was on the floor just beneath. So the pilots are probably the stupidest people on board. Absolutely. These are the brilliant, these are the scientists, the engineers, the mission specialists. So not only are they most of them are PhDs or MDs. Not only are they Nobel laureate level, but they're also garage mechanics, because these are the ones who do the fixing of things. And when you see people walking in space, those are the ones who do that. And so it's quite a crew we put together, the dumb pilots and then the brilliant ones. Now, we dumb pilots, if you look around, See all these switches everywhere? There are more than 2,000 of them that we have control of. And each one is essential for the safe and successful mission that we're on. And so most of our training is how to handle a failure injected by our training team that we then have to correct, safe, and then make a determination of whether we continue or not. And so there is a great relationship between the training crew and the crew itself. The training crew is trying to kill us. We, the crew, are trying to make fools of the training team. And so the banter and the excitement of training is not a burden at all. It really is a lot of fun, and we actually look forward to it. Now let me give you a sense of the evolution. The cockpit of the Apollo looked like this, all switches. The space shuttle after it was updated, this is what the panel looked like. You notice there are CRTs there, we call it a glass cockpit. When I was flying it, there were only 3, 1, 2, 3, and everything else was switches. So we got rid of about 25 switches when we went to this old glass, but there were still 2,000 remaining. The bottom one is SpaceX. They have 8 switches. So we went from this to this to this. And this gives you an indication of how technology has really escalated in the past 10, 15 years. And so if you're interested in a program, getting into a program now, you are in a world now that I had only imagined when I was flying. And so the concentration now is the mission, as opposed to saving your ass, which is the way it happened to be in the past. So, here's a space shuttle. Last flight was 2011, so quite a few years ago. The components, the thing with the wings on it, we would call the shuttle, and that one is probably Discovery. On the back of that shuttle are 3 rocket engines we call the main engines. And those rocket engines ignite about 5 seconds before liftoff. And you'll see it, if you were watching it, you'd see the white billowing smoke. Actually, it was steam. Once those main engines started, and they pumped a lot of water under the orbiter to suppress sound and to minimize damage that the echo would cause on the orbiter. Main engines ignite. They use fuel and oxidizer that is stored in that big brown tank. The fuel and oxidizer was just oxygen and hydrogen in there, nothing exotic at all. The countdown continued, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, at 0. The big white rockets on either side ignited, and there was no doubt you were going someplace really fast. Straight up for 10 seconds. Then rolled over on its back like this and flew over you, the Atlantic Ocean. 18 minutes after we took off from Florida, we crossed the west coast of Africa. 18 minutes. 2 minutes after we took off, those big white rockets that burn all the fuel, and they were actually blown away from the tank, and they settled in the Atlantic Ocean. NASA fetched them, sent them back to the manufacturers, who cleaned, refurbished, refilled, and sent them back to the Kennedy Space Center for reuse. The main engines continued to accelerate us to something called orbital velocity. And that's the speed we have to acquire to go enter and maintain an orbit around the Earth. And that orbital velocity is, as you all know, 17,500 miles an hour. And we do that in 8 minutes. So how long does it take to get to space? 8 minutes. How fast are you going? 17,500 miles an hour. And at that speed, you circle the Earth every hour and a half. Every 90 minutes, you go completely around the world. And in that 90 minutes, 45 minutes of it is daylight. And then, bam, the sun is gone, it's pitch black. 45 minutes, and then bam, the sun is back up. And so if you're into long romantic evenings on Chesapeake Beach, this is not the place for you to be. So as you circle the Earth continues to rotate to the east, as it always does. And so every time you come around, you will actually see something further to the west. And so on each, even a short mission, 4 or 5 days, you will see most of this beautiful world we call home down beneath you. It's just, it just takes your breath away. And then it gets boring. So how can you go to space? Well, there is and you can do that if you got it. You got the bucks. Yeah. There's a company, there's a guy named Branson. And Branson has anything that starts with Virgin. Virgin Atlantic, the Virgin ships. He's got this Virgin Galactic right there. You can buy a seat, if you dare, on that vehicle that just got released. And this is on a huge airplane hung underneath the wing, widest wingspan I've ever seen in my life. And it'll take you up to 35 or 40,000 feet and then just drop you. And then at the back of that silver thing is an exhaust. They ignite a rocket and it will take you, accelerate you up to the edge of space and then bring you home. And when you land, you can get out and say, I'm an astronaut. But, so you can do that if you have the bucks. Now there's another company, and I believe that I own a significant share of this group. This guy named Jeff Bezos. And since I get 2 to 3 Amazon deliveries every day, I believe that I own this. This is called the New Shepard. And you can buy a seat in this. And when it ignites, it'll go up to the edge of space and come back and land. And you can say, I'm an astronaut. You get out. It's called the New Shepard. Our first astronaut who flew was a guy named Al Shepard. And at my age, I knew him extremely well. And so they called it Al Shepard because on his launch, he only went to the edge of space and came back. So we name it for him. And you can buy a seat on that. Now Bezos has got much, much greater plans, heavier plans than this. His next rocket, which was, when were we in Cocoa Beach? 3 weeks ago?
Yep.
About 3 weeks ago. His next one, called the New Glenn, launched. We were just down there coincidentally in Cocoa Beach, and when this thing ignited at 2:03 in the morning, it shook the entire world. And the windows in the house that we were in just rattled. New Glenn. Why would they call it that? Because John Glenn was the first astronaut to circle, U.S. astronaut to circle the Earth. And so this is a much more powerful rocket, and it, if you are on it, will circle the Earth. But again, Jeff Bezos has got much greater plans than just doing things in low Earth orbit. And I'll mention that a little later. Company up in Colorado, family owned. They have something called the Dream Chaser. The company's called Sierra Space, and or one of the divisions is called Sierra Space. And it is a winged, we call it a lifting body. It's very similar to the orbiter. It takes off vertically, but when it comes back, it lands on the runway. So it rolls as opposed to a chute and being dropped down either on Earth in the water out there. Principally to support a space station on orbit, so it will carry people and equipment. I would guess April or May, we're hoping to get this thing in the air. But this is a serious vehicle right now, and they may or may not offer an opportunity to fly, but it is a very good program. Now this one we all know, this is SpaceX, this is Elon Musk. This is his Falcon. Last year, of the 87 launches, I believe, from the Kennedy Space Center, 78 of them were SpaceX. And he launches more in 3 days than the US launches in 6 months or 8 months. And something impossible to him is, well, if you can get it done by 12, is 12:30 okay? And that's the impossible things. And his sense of urgency is 10 minutes, 5 minutes, as opposed to, well, we'll have a committee, a typical way, a typical way. SpaceX. So, now here's his crew, and obviously he did not get the memo about the orange, nor about the weight or anything like that. And so this is just a typical SpaceX crew. Now he had a flight about a year ago with a guy named Isaacman, Jared Isaacman, and they lifted off in the Falcon, and they went into an orbit, not a circular one, but an elliptical one, with the furthest point, the apogee, about 800 miles from the surface of the Earth. And so instead of it being a circle like this, it looks like this. 800 miles was further than any human ever in low Earth orbit ever to go. And then on the way back at about 250 or 300 miles, they did a spacewalk. So it's the first time ever a non-government organization has ever done a spacewalk. And so with this commercial program, they're talking about things like boosting the Hubble or boosting the International Space Station. I mean, these guys have no limit as to what it is that they're going to do. And here is Jared. He's the taller one, the second from the right. And Jared could very well become the new administrator of NASA after the series of confirmation hearings go on. And it will be interesting because this is a commercially focused guy with nothing is impossible, and I'll have it to you by noon, as opposed to the NASA that I knew, that just took forever and ever to get anything done. So it's going to be interesting to see what occurs in the next 6 months, 8 months, to determine whether the moon is still the target or whether we're going to skip and just go to Mars or try to do something like that. Starliner. This is like Gilligan's Island, if you remember the old thing. We put a crew on board to take it to the International Space Station. It was supposed to be an 8-day trip. The crew is still there. That was in June, I believe. And they were scheduled to come home once they realized that there was a problem here in February, well, this month. And I think it's been delayed to next month, we'll hope. That they come home soon. And it's going to be interesting because Boeing is an old commercial group. It's, it's legacy. And they're going to come home on Elon Musk's. And so, these guys I can see Boeing now. Any Boeing people? Kind of?
Family.
I was family.
Family and Boeing, yeah.
I'd buy something else. So here's that crew that's been stranded up there for a while. Sonny is in charge, the one on the far right, is in charge of the station as she's there. And they just did a big spacewalk this week up there. So they're busily engaged, but I hope they took enough underwear. That's up there. So what's the current program is something called Artemis, and I don't know if you've heard of that or not. Artemis is way behind schedule, way over costs. It launched, let's see, this is 20 November, Artemis 1 launched, which is this thing right here. launched in November 2022, I believe. Way behind schedule. Using a lot of shuttle parts, by the way. And you will recognize, like, the solid rocket boosters on the side. The tank looks kind of familiar. On the bottom here are shuttle engines. And up here is another shuttle engine. And that was intentionally put together so that it would be faster. You know, we got all these proven parts. And, but again, they're way behind the schedule. And the shuttle recovered everything except for the tank. Nothing is recovered on this one. So to me, that's a step backwards. The solids are not recovered. The main engines are not recovered. That orbital engine, a little higher, the tank, nothing is recovered at all. So I'm not quite sure why we did that. But it went on a great mission. That's Earth on the left side, Moon on the right. It went to the Moon, but instead of orbiting the Moon, as we had done in the past, it actually used the Moon as a slingshot and went out here. And that's about 3,000 miles beyond the Moon. And to me, that was the only interesting part of the whole mission. When Artemis 2 flies, if it flies, this is what the astronauts will see. And this was a picture taken from the Artemis 1. So that's the Moon. So you're looking at Earthrise behind the Moon, and we're about 3,000 miles beyond the Moon. And so if Artemis 2 flies eventually, which is scheduled for this September, but I think it's going to be pushed back further, the crew will see this view, and they will then be further away from Earth than any human ever before. Okay, so that's the current program there, but this is Elon's envisionment. This is done down in the valley in Texas, south of Galveston by Corpus Christi, St. Padre Island down there. This rocket has twice the thrust of any rocket ever. And the one I mentioned earlier, Jeff Bezos, I think those two are pretty comparable in first stage. And so when this thing launches, there is no doubt there's something going on. Great rocket. They haven't had complete success yet on the entire mission. But this one was fascinating when they brought it. Maybe you saw this on TV. That's that first stage. They brought it back to the launch pad right here, and they captured it, and they called it chopsticks. I mean, it flew itself in, and it closed the chopsticks there, and it ended up like this. So this is a takeoff and landing from the same place. This is again is the Gulf of Mexico out there. So that's kind of the human spaceflight part of it, and you can see there's a huge jump in capabilities as we begin to move forward. Okay, we have the Hubble, Earth below, space. Hubble is looks like a telescope to me. It's been up there for decades now. It's taken amazing views, primarily in the visual. And in fact, this is our Milky Way taken by the Hubble, and with great clarity, relative to the time. But there is a new telescope out there now called the James Webb. It really doesn't look much like a legacy telescope. It's in the IR range. And it's interesting because Hubble's in an orbit around the Earth. This one is at something called a Lagrange point. And let me explain that to you. The sun in the middle, Earth on the right side there. Both are magnets. Sun and Earth are magnets, and they both attract things. Gravity is a sense, Okay, so there's a point, though, where the pull of one balances the pull of the other. And where that equals is called a Lagrange point. And the obvious one is L1, between the sun and the Earth. About 1 million miles out or so. It's, but you'd have to be a mathematician to realize there are another 4. And L2 is on the back, L2 is on the back side of the Earth. L3 is on the back side of the sun, and L4 and 5 precede and follow the Earth in orbit like that. This James Webb is actually at L2, and it's there. It will stay there forever because it's a balance point. And so it has an opportunity to take amazing photos from out there and use a kind of a comparison between what you got from the Hubble, which is the top picture, and with the James Webb down below. And it's just significant. It is just, you know, I mean, it's not even really in the same ballpark at all. And so again, this is that technology I'm talking about and how it's moving on rapidly. This is what you see. And by the way, the James Webb is just one of the many new telescopes. So we're beginning to learn more and more about our universe. Now we're outside of our Milky Way constellation. We're talking of universe now. And it took this picture, James Webb. And you can see all these constellations out here. And so if I could put a grain of sand on my finger and hold it out like that, this is what you're looking at, the equivalent within our universe. This is a very small part. And if you count it, and please don't, there are 5,000 constellations in this picture. And people are saying, well, how many constellations are there? Well, there are about 2 trillion constellations in our universe. Each one of those constellations could have solar systems. Each one of those solar systems could have planets that look like Earth. And so I think you're really naive to believe that we are alone here. The discovery is the discovery as part of this adventure that we're on. It's a journey that has no end with lots of adventures as part of it. So Mars is interesting to us. Earth and Mars are in orbits. Mars is a bit more elliptical than ours. But every now and then our 2 planets are close together as they are shown here. And that's the time, if we're going to go to Mars using legacy technology, that's how close we would be when we lift off. But even at this short distance, it would take us 8 months to get to Mars. 8 months. And once you get there, you're going to have to leave before Earth and Mars separate. So you can really only spend about 25 days, 30 days there, and then 8 months back. What in the world do you do with humans for 8 months plus 8 months when all they get to do is 25 days almost? So I want to get to Mars in 2 weeks. And so I'll ask these kids, because nobody's told them, no, you can't do it. Now, you tell me an 80-year-old who knows what no means. They don't. And so that's the kind of thinking that we should be having, not the way we've done it in the past, but another adventure of doing a new and different way. So that eventually we can get to Mars, and we can then begin a eyes-on study to determine perhaps if we are alone. And start a station of some sort, a colony of some sort there. Not as a end, but as a step for the next thing we do. So everything we do enables the next thing that we do. We learn from this so that we can do the next thing. And so the journey is that trip. The adventure are things like this. Okay, up there now, always up there, decades, the International Space Station. Initially put together by a coalition of 5 entities: the United States, Japan, Canada, the European Space Agency, and Russia. Five. We've had 140, 150 countries that have visited it. Typical mission for this might be 6 months or so. There's a laboratory on board the space station. I don't know what they're doing up there, to be honest with you. So if I were to justify it, I would have a difficulty justifying it to you, even to me. Who else is up there, the other space station? Well, this is the Chinese space station. They call their astronauts, by the way, takonauts up there. They've been up there a little over a year. they've got a laboratory up there too. I don't know what they're doing on board. But I was telling you earlier about these other companies like Sierra Nevada and Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin. They're thinking of creating their own space stations up there, commercial space stations. But note the difference, there's a difference. We send up the huge module, the aluminum modules. They want to send up little packages like this and then inflate them once they get on orbit. So what you're looking at is an inflatable space station up there. And so that's what I'm looking for in the future. Not the way we've done it, not the legacy, but a new way of doing things like that. And I think this is possible, and I think that they will soon actually put this in work. They've already evaluated these modules. In fact, there's a small one attached to the space station up there, because the disbelievers believe that it's more vulnerable to space debris than the metal ones are. But in fact, they found out, no, it's exactly the opposite. This is what it looks like inside. That's an amazing laboratory. I have no idea what they're doing up there. There's a small group of people who's interested, but if I go out, and I'll reference you all as Joe Bag of Donuts, that's what you all are. If I try to explain to you what they're doing, I would have a problem. And if you can't explain it, then how in the world can you justify it, and how can you get monies to support it? And that's one of the problems. It's like going back to the moon for me. We've done that. We got to do something new to get the excitement of us. So what I want to do is build a Holiday Inn Express. That's what I want. Holiday Inn Express, this thing rotates. And so if you're on the outer rim, you have gravity of sort. As you get toward the center, you go to no gravity. That's where I want to put the swimming pool. And so the question is, how do I keep water in the swimming pool in no gravity? I'm going to go to the third graders. And so that's the kind of the way I think. And so just imagine when you wake up one morning, there's your suite, and looking out the window and staring out into space, if that's your thing, or down at Earth, as these folks are doing. And just think, the stories you were sharing when you came home, you'd have to go around the neighborhood and tell people, you can't believe what I saw up there. Woo! Like that. And that's exactly the way you'd be when you came back. But the question is, what are you going to have for food? So if you went to New Orleans, you knew what you'd get down there, right? You went to Kansas City, you get a good steak. You came to Chesapeake Beach, you know what you're going to have on your plate, right? What are they going to have up there? I don't know, but that's what I'm thinking about. What's Rita's Cafe going to serve in space that when you come home, you're going to say, I have never had this. It was the most delicious thing in the world. So I start thinking about those kinds of things instead of, it's going to be hard or impossible to do. And it keeps me smiling all the time when I began thinking about what the future is. So here we are. This is us right now. We're looking out into space, and we're looking into the future now. And the question is, what is it that I have done, or what is it that I want to do that keeps us excited? What is it that we're going to do that is written in history books, not as a footnote, but as major chapters in the books? And so I'm not a status quo person. I want somebody to do things that are scary and risky. Yeah, of course you could lose your life. But that's part of the deal about moving forward. My daddy always told me, you got to do something tomorrow you thought impossible yesterday. So each day you raise the bar on that high jump. And because you're going to pass on to the next generation stuff you have developed, but also this enthusiasm and excitement about the future. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. There is a memorial service down the road. But if anyone, and it starts at 2, but if anyone has any questions, maybe a minute or two. I'd love to answer them, and then we can all move down the road a little bit. Yes, sir.
I just have a comment about where you have talked about the beginning, which is the search for knowledge. But throughout history, it seems to me that everything that has resulted in exploration begins with somebody asking the question, but always ends with some country or some establishment going for the money,
Oh.
for commerce. It ends with a nation sponsoring, whether it's the, we could look in the Western Hemisphere, the Spanish, the explorations are done on some private level, getting a little backing, but then the governments come in, or the entities, whether it's the British or the French or the Dutch. It's always a commercial end. That's the motivation for everything.
Yes. And if you talk to these folks, like I've talked to Bezos, I've talked to Elon, I've talked to the family, certainly, financial gain is a driver. But when you talk to them, they have a passion that I sense where their bottom line is discovery and answering questions. And so I am certain that money is certainly an issue, but it's the object. There is an object, but the issue for them, these guys don't much care how much it costs, and that's what I sense. I don't know if any of y'all watch Yellowstone. Do you see that? Where you have a group of people who want to maintain Montana as it is, and then you have the folks who are coming in who are trying to make money from tourism. Money will always be a bottom line, but these folks at this point are more interested in the discovery, the exploration. And then these guys, when it gets to a point where money is the object, they will be looking at something even beyond that. So I agree with you, but I think that passion, discovery, curiosity is also essential in their makeup. Yes, ma'am?
I just wanted to say thank you for all the work and dedication that you had to do to go into space and then to come here and tell us about it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, thank you. Yes, ma'am?
And you're doing futures thinking and visioning, and I wonder if you think you talk about third graders, how important is it that we incorporate futures thinking and visioning the future in our education?
Well, I think it is absolutely essential, mandatory, because if at a point, let's say they're 25 or 28, the preparation that they have had started right at this age, right here. That's where it all begins, and it's not something that, when you're 24, you decide, well, I want to be a doctor, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon, and then the next year complain that you couldn't get into med school. The unfortunate thing is, you didn't take any biology, or any chemistry, or you didn't do all those things that we as parents, or great-grandparents, do for our next generation. And that's the thing, give them more than what our parents gave us. And so in order to do these things, we have to start preparing at a very early age, getting that excitement there, exposing them to things that their neighbors maybe had never seen before. That's the kind of thing that creates a passion for learning, drives you for curiosity, by curiosity. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thanks for your time.